to our first talk, which is Lachlan talking about porting your app from .NET Framework to .NET Core. And Lachlan is indeed a co-host. So if you just give us a moment, he should be able to share his screen. Fabulous.
How's that?
And that is great. Everyone should get your little Twitter handle and start the tweety thing. But over to you, Lachlan.
Cool. I use Zoom at work, so I've had lots of practice, which is, I'm lucky there. Yeah, so my name's Lachlan B. I'm Rocklin on Twitter, and I'm going to obviously talk about how to port code to .NET Core. I am trying to learn Korean. If there's any Korean people here or Korean speakers, please get in contact with me. I'd love to meet you. I'd also like to start by saying that it's really, really easy at these conferences to think that what everyone else knows is massive and what you know is really, really small. And that's sort of because we're talking about the stuff that we've studied for years. Well, hopefully anyway. But that's definitely not the case. And what it's actually like is that I know what's in the blue circle and you know what's in the black circle. So no matter how much you think, oh, I really don't know anything here and these old guys seem to all know so much, it's definitely not true. You know, and what you know overlaps with what I know and with what other people know, but you definitely have your own area of expertise. All right, so last week I posted on Reddit, what is your biggest challenge as a .NET dev? And if we're in a conference, if we're in a room together, I'd get everyone to shout out and to say, oh, I think the top answer was this. But the top answer, 16 votes, was migrating legacy systems away, which fair enough, but from web forms and WIM forms. There's some terms I haven't heard in a long time. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense. .NET has been around for, is it 20 years? A really long time. So there's so many applications and so much code out there that's going to be old. That's just the nature of the beast. And it's very easy to think that everybody is doing .NET Core, everybody is doing Blazor, everybody's doing Kubernetes or whatever. But the majority of code and systems is old because it's been around for that long. And it's a challenge for everyone. So when I started looking at this talk and how to quickly explain how to move your app to .NET Core, and especially with ASP.NET, it's pretty massive. There's lots of things you can do that you need to do. But I thought the best way to get my message across is to say you can do it incrementally. You don't have to do the big bang approach, and don't do the big bang approach. The big bang is downing tools, writing your new .NET Core version, and then trying to support the old version, and then trying to build the new version, and then releasing the new version, and then finding all the bugs in the new one, and then trying to shut down the old one, and it's a nightmare. You don't have to do that when it comes to porting your app. I should have also said that this is what I've been doing in the past year with all the applications that I work on, is moving them all to .NET Core. So with .NET Framework code, that's what we're talking about at the moment. There's also the new .NET Core code, but you can see there's a lot of overlap in the middle. And that's code that's really similar. I think code to send an email is exactly the same in .NET Framework as in .NET Core. I might be wrong about that, but it's probably pretty similar. And this stuff that's similar is .NET Standard. I think that's a really good, simple way to understand what .NET Standard is. If you Google .NET Standard, the explanations are really confusing and complicated, but I think that sort of distills it pretty well. So what you can do is actually start porting all of your code to .NET Standard, and then you're already 90% of the way there. And then all you have to do is build your new .NET Core application that references all of your new .NET Standard code, which you can then keep reusing. So anyway, so yeah, most people want to port their .NET Framework code directly to .NET Core. Don't do that. Well, you can if you want, but you're in for a world of pain. Instead, port as much as your code as you can to .NET Standard. And then you can build your new .NET Core application, but you can reference all of that .NET Standard code. And you can reuse that .NET Standard code in your framework app while you're building your new .NET Core version. So how do we do that? Let's say that we've got some code. We've got a customer controller code that's calling an email logic. class that needs to look up a customer. So that is then accessing the customer repository. So that's sort of the dependency order here. Customer is calling email logic, which is calling customer repository. Start down at the very bottom. Start at the bottom of the dependency chain with a customer repository. So let's say we've got our ASP.NET application here, and we've got all of our code hopefully sitting in a business logic class or in a logic class. If not, it might be a part of the main project. Hopefully it's separate, but if it's part of the main project, that's fine. But what we want to do is create a new .NET standard project and reference that from your solution. And then move your classes across to the .NET standard project one at a time and starting at the lowest dependency. So in this case, I'm moving across the customer repository, get it all to work, and then I can get rid of it out of there. And then I just reference that .NET standard. And that way my .NET Framework app, it keeps running, but I'm 1% of the way there. A small part of my app is on .NET standard, which means I've already started moving it all to .NET Core. Then I move all the other classes across, and then I reference that. And then eventually, hopefully your code will look like that. You want to move as much as you possibly can to .NET Standard out into that project. There's lots of different clever ways of doing that, which I don't have time to get into now. Then you can build your new .NET Core application and reference that standard code. And hopefully that .NET Core application is quite lightweight and smaller and easier to build. But you can also do that incrementally as well. So what you can also do is build your .NET Framework applications, and a subset of that, in this case, the employees section, you can see of my little business app is responsible for editing customers and employees. The employees section of my .NET Framework application can actually be .NET Core. So you can do that. Lots of different ways you can do that. Reverse proxies is always the answer to everything when it comes to this kind of thing, I found. But you can just create a virtual directory for using IIS, and that is actually your .NET Core app. And you can slowly build that up, slowly move everything into there and avoid the whole big bang approach. The two big gotchas, and what kept sort of catching us out in my team was the, I might as well upgrade it. Because when you're working on moving all this to .NET Core, you can go, oh, the way of doing HTML helpers in ASP.NET Core is using tag helpers. I might as well fix it. Let's convert it all across to tag helpers. Or let's move all of my application settings out of my web config and into the new fancy app settings.json. Don't do that. Don't do that. Try to keep everything exactly the same. You can do HTML helpers in .NET Core. You can pull out data from your web config file in .NET Core. Try to keep all of it exactly the same. Stick wrappers around everything, and resist the urge to upgrade. And you'll just do it because you're in there. You're like, oh, I could use this cool new feature. You know, try not to do that. And then same problem with you want to fix it. You'll get in there and you'll find bugs and you'll be like, this depends on this. Oh, let's rip all this out. Let's change all this. But you have to keep reminding yourself, no, all I'm doing is porting it. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to get it to work in .NET Core. So that's it. There's obviously, it does get a lot more complicated, but that's sort of the big picture. That's the way we're trying to tackle things at Mercer. I'm planning on running a few workshops if anyone's interested. Tweet me on Twitter at Lachlan, and I've got a bunch of examples where we can actually practice doing a lot of this stuff. But I thought a really good way of finishing this talk is this slide. This is a guy who, his name is David Neal, and I saw a talk of his 3 or 4 years ago, and he finished on this slide, and he said the amount of reaction he got from this slide has been just ridiculous. But it's a great reminder. If you try to go to your boss and say, I want to port my whole application to .NET Core, I need 3 months and lots of money, they'll just go, whoa, hang on, what are you talking about? That's a lot of work and that's a lot of upfront investment. But to create a .NET standard project and to put one class into there, you don't need permission to do that. Well, if you're working for me, I wouldn't need to give you permission, if you know what I mean. So yeah, remember, it's easier to, no, I won't say that. I'll get myself in trouble. But that'll do. I'll finish it up there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Lachlan. That was awesome. So how many times in your working career have you had to ask for forgiveness?
Every day. Too
Yeah.
often, and normally when I'm getting angry with people. Or, yeah, I won't answer that question.
It was high risk. I love how you've done that. So has that been, you said you've been doing it for a year. How long do you think the whole project's going to be moved over?
Oh, so the application that I was working on, it sort of had about 3 or 4 web services that it depended on. So we rewrote those first because they were kind of really self-contained.
Yeah.
And then the main ASP.NET application, it probably took 3 to 6 months, but we weren't in a hurry. It was great because we just kind of did it all behind the scenes because we were slowly moving everything into .NET Standard. So for example, moving Entity Framework to Entity Framework Core, but just really, really slowly doing it. So we went in sort of a hurry. So I couldn't tell you exactly, but it depends on the size of your application and how aggressive you want to be, I guess. Yeah.
I really like that strategy about doing it bit by bit without those timeframes we put on stuff and then we rush through and break things. Now we've got a question pop up by Beck Martin in the chat. It says, I don't know the standard thing. Does this also apply to SDKs? I used to have this issue with SDKs being in the wrong thing. If I just produced them in standard, would it work for all .NET customers?
Does anyone else want to try? I'm not quite sure exactly what they're asking. I don't know the standard thing either. Does this also apply to SDKs? Not sure the best way to answer that.
I wonder if I could inject. I wonder if he's referring to how I just said that I didn't realize that was why they called it standard. It was just purely that it was like this intersection of old and new.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. And I didn't realize like that Venn diagram thing was really interesting. And the whole compatibility layer thing. So I guess the takeaway is that if I'd produced all of .NET SDK in .NET Standard, it would have worked for both core customers and framework customers.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
You've got another question there, Lachlan, too, around, gosh, chat flicks up too fast. The web layer is the most complicated to migrate. Things are so different. You can't just configure JSON routing, global ASX, etc. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it definitely is. That's why you want to do it as a small section. So hopefully your application has got nice URLs and nice divisions. You can say, let's just move this section. So in that example slide, I showed that I have my application, which I can use for editing customers and employees and lots of other things. I can just move the employees section to .NET Core and build that web application just to do that section.
I like it. This is the .standard thing. Sorry, .NET Standard. I hadn't realized that either. The Venn diagram helped my brain understand all the things. But what we might do now is, thank you again, Lachlan, that was great.